Hello, we are here back with Kevin. Today, we are going to continue our look at the history of Palladium books, and I'm excited because it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles time. And so I was always a fan of the Turtles comic. Um, my wife is a huge fan of the Turtles cartoon, and I'm like, there's a lot of discrepancy between those two, right? The characters are very similar, but the tone is completely different. But having come into Palladium through Heroes Unlimited, I very quickly found TMNT. So you had released Heroes Unlimited, you had another success on your hands, and you decided to go after the Turtles license. Why is that? How did that all come about?
Well, I was looking for a property that could get us into comic book stores.
Yeah.
And, I just sort of had my eyes open. I was a comic book guy and I'm always looking for things. And I have a philosophy of licensing, which is there are three reasons to get a license, and any one of those reasons are worth it. But if all three fall into place, it's just perfect. So Turtles, and then ironically, a year later, Robotech, would fall into all three categories. And those are, you love the property, think it's going to make you a pile of money, or it's going to open up new doors for you. And like I said, Turtles was all three. And it's funny because I just had my eyes open for a property that might really work. And I had heard about Turtles. I would get the Comics Buyer's Guide and a couple other fan magazines. So I knew it was coming, and then I knew it came out, and I knew it was hot. I could never lay my hands on an issue number one. I found out later that's because there were only 3,000 copies printed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, it was a one-shot black and white comic, Mirage Studios' first comic book. It was a parody. They never originally planned it as a series. They thought it'd be a fun one-shot. They were just goofing around, and they're like, what's hot these days? And they're like, well, mutants are hot because of the X-Men.
Yep.
And teenagers are hot because of the X-Men and Teen Titans and a few other things. And at the time, Frank Miller's Daredevil was super hot. And that was full of ninja, and it had, the hand.
Yeah, I was just going to say the hand, which obviously inspires the foot.
And again, it was supposed to be sort of a dark parody that they were just having fun with, the first issue. And the thing exploded. By today's vernacular, it went viral.
Yeah.
No one could get their hands on it. They did a second printing, I think, of like 5,000 copies, and I couldn't get hold of that either. And I go to my comic book store one day, and lo and behold, there's TMNT number 2. So I scooped it up, and I laid down to read some comics that evening, and I read number 2, and I turned to my wife, Marianne, and said, man, this is a really cool comic. This would make a great role-playing game, provided that the creators would let me expand it to include all types of mutant animals. Because, who doesn't like or know animals? We all know animals.
Yep.
Most of us have grown up with a dog or a cat or a bird. We see them all our lives. We're just familiar with animals.
Yeah.
And that's why George Lucas put the Wookiee in there.
Yeah.
Because he thought, well, it'd be sort of like a dog person, and it's Han's best friend, and dogs are man's best friend, and what the heck? So I'm like, man, this would be great. And like 5 or 10 minutes later, the phone rings, and it's someone on the phone who I've never met or heard of before. And he's like, have you read the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic book? And I'm like, yeah, I just finished issue number 2. I think, the voice says, I think this would make a great role-playing game or a supplement for Heroes Unlimited. And I'm like, I do too.
Who are you? How did you get this number?
Well, and he had, it's back in the day where, he had the white pages and you just looked up someone's name and, hey, there's Frank Frazetta. Let's give him a call.
Yeah.
So it was like, hey, there's Kevin Sabita. And this guy was a fan of Heroes Unlimited as well. And so he, in fact, I think originally he thought of it as a source book for Heroes Unlimited, and I saw it as its own complete game. So, I'm like, yeah, no, I mean, we talked about it, and he was all fired up, and apparently he wanted to break into role-playing, or had just broken into role-playing as like a freelance writer, and said, I'd be happy to write it for you. And I said, well, I've got some really strong ideas on what I would want on this, but, we can talk. I said, but the first thing we have to do is secure the license. So I'll have to track down Mirage Studio. And he's like, I already have. And I'm like, what? And he gives me the number. I call Mirage Studios. We have a nice chat. I think it was Peter who picked up the phone, or so. Anyways, Peter is the guy I talked to. And we just hit it off. I think we were around the same age. We're both into comic books. We were both, in my mind, comic book artists.
Yeah.
I had done comic book art. Palladium was just, a part-time thing until I broke into comics. And yeah, it was really a fun conversation. I asked him about Duo Shade and, how do you get those lines and stuff? And it's like, oh, that's a chemical board called Duo Shade. And we had this really great talk. And he's like, yeah, let's because I got to talk to my partner, Kevin Eastman. But, I think we're in. And he got back to me a couple of days later and said, yeah, let's do this. And I had pitched already the idea of, it's got to be a more expansive world. It can't just be the turtles. So would you let me set it up so that you could create any kind of, mutant animal? And they were both like, sure, that's fine. So I said, well, we need to drop a contract. And they're like, oh, well, we're like a brand new company. Those are our first couple of books. We like you, we trust you, you sound like a good guy. I think they had checked me out. Peter had, from what they could tell, I had a good reputation. And they're like, why don't you write it up? Because they couldn't really afford an attorney. And I'm like, sure, I know business stuff. I can write this up. So I actually wrote up the contract. It was fair. It was exactly what we had talked about.
Yeah.
So they signed it. And I talked to this freelance writer and said, okay, we got it. Let's go take a run at it. But these are the things I want in it. It's got to have rules for mutant animals. It's got to have animal powers. I want to be able to do any kind of mutant animal. And the problem was he really apparently was already a super fan of the turtles. So his feeling was nobody wanted mutant animals. They really wanted just the turtles. And so we kind of went around and around with that. But he finally said, okay, sure, I'll put stuff in there. We could create other animals. I'm like, great. So he's off writing that. Meanwhile, I'm having Eastman and Laird start on the artwork for various animals. And I asked them if they would do a short comic strip special for the role-playing game. And again, these guys, fast forward 40 years into the future, everyone knows Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird and all the Mirage Studio guys, Jim Lawson and Dan Berger and the whole crew, Eric Talbot, Steve Levine. They're all great guys. And so, of course, Kevin and Pete go, yeah, it sounds like it makes total sense. And my logic was I wanted to create a book that role players would go, what is this? This is pretty cool. Even if they never heard of the comic, and most of them hadn't. But also wanted the comic book fans to go, wait, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, the role-playing game. I need to pick this up. And when they pick it up and flip through it, I want
There
them
would
to
be a comic book there, yeah.
art by Eastman and Laird, the
Mhm.
original creators, and a brand new comic strip. I also made a point of figuring out a price point that I thought would be a good point of entry for anyone, because role players wouldn't blink twice at paying $9.95, which is what the original price was for a role playing game. Even double that.
Yeah.
But
Comic book fans.
right, you're talking, this is a day where comic books were what, I don't know, 75 cents or a buck and a quarter, something like that. The black and white turtle comic was probably a whopping $1.50 or $1.99. I don't remember. So I needed something where they'd go, I don't know, it's $10, but geez, it's got this comic, it's got art, it looks cool. I'm going to give it a try.
Yeah.
And it's funny because in business, role playing is really important, because I just kind of sat back and role played. If I was a comic book fan, what would attract me to this role playing game? And it was easy because I was a role playing fan, and I immediately fell in love with the turtles like the rest of the frickin' world. So it was easy for me to extrapolate upon and think about, I would pay $10 with little hesitation. More than that, I'm going to really have to think about it. And I don't want them to think about it. I want them to buy it, because I know once they buy it, read it, play it, they're going to be hooked. So that was the plan. Eastman and Laird were great. They were like happy to do all that stuff. In fact, it was kind of funny because they were sending me, the pencils to the comic strip and to their artwork, for approval before they inked it. And from the get-go, these two guys were just top professionals. And I'm like, well, yeah, approved. I don't know if I changed anything.
Right.
I might have here and there, but, it was great. So they're doing the art, and then Eastman calls me up one day and says, hey, Kev, do you have anyone who's done the cover, or who's going to do the cover? You know who's going to do the cover? And I'm like, no, I haven't thought about that yet. He's like, could I do the cover? And I'm like, I don't know. We were doing painted covers, or trying to get, I want to go towards painted covers.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to give it a shot and won't be hurt if I don't use it. And he's like, no, that'd be fine. Let me do it up. And he turns in a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, we'll use your cover. It's
That's
great.
Right. Oh, twist my arm.
And then, they threw together this cool piece for the back cover as well.
Yeah.
And I didn't learn till like years and years, hell, just until recent years, maybe 10 years ago, that this was Kevin Eastman's very first painting. That guy, I mean, he was like 24 at the time, if I remember correctly, supremely talented. Just, doing the Redux edition that we're working on at this moment in 2024.
Yeah.
It's made us, Sean and I, go back and look at the comics and look at the art, and my God, those guys were so good.
Yeah.
I mean, both of them were just so good. I mean, and not just the art itself, being dynamic and compelling and very interesting looking, but the originality of the story and the actual storytelling, the panel layout and the cinematicness of it, and how dynamic everything was. I mean, those guys were so talented.
Yeah.
It's like I found a whole new appreciation for their work.
Well, and there's still, I mean, I remember last year, I was at my public library and saw, I always go through the trade paperbacks that are there, and saw Last Ronin. And my God, they did a great job with Last Ronin. Like they're still turning out amazing Turtles content. And like the art is beautiful and the storyline was gut wrenching. If you haven't checked out Last Ronin, go read Last Ronin. Like,
yes,
highly recommended.
I do too. I think I've been buying it, the hardcover collection for people for Christmas, for, last year, this year, birthdays. I mean, it is a great new comic strip that is, or graphic novel that is so true to the original comics, and very powerful. The story,
the story
really well done.
Yeah. So you've got this great cover. You've got Eric Wujek did the system design, correct?
So what happened was 3 or 4 months go by, and I've had several conversations with this freelance writer, and we've continued to go around the idea of how important the turtles and the comic book characters are, versus we got to have all kinds of mutant animals in there. And when the manuscript finally comes in, it just did not fit what I had in mind at all. So I sent him a kill fee and said, sorry, I can't use this. And I was ripping my hair out because it's like, oh my gosh, because we were so excited about it. And I thought we could just pound it out really quick. Because we're going to keep it pretty simple. A lot of the game rules, the core rules, we're going to use my existing game rules that are in Palladium Fantasy and Heroes Unlimited. So that part is already all done. We just need to add an extra layer of rules and some concepts and a bunch of animal statistics and animal powers to make it all work. And I had started to put ads in Dragon Magazine saying, coming this summer, I think it was this summer. I think we were shooting for it to have it as a Gen Con release. And now it's just like, oh my God, I got to go start from ground zero and finish this up. And I guess I could write it, but I was in the middle of, I think, a Palladium Fantasy supplement that I wanted to get out. And my head wasn't really in that space, and I really wanted to finish that book. And there was also the problem of, okay, I could stop this book and do Turtles, which means this book is going to be 6 months late because it's going to take me at least 3 months to do Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
And then another couple months to do that other book. Or I could put Turtles aside and make it really late and come out with this book pretty much on time. And it's like, what am I going to do? And I was lamenting this to Wujek. And good old Eric, he's like, yeah, Kev, why don't you let me do it? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I'm in the middle of my own project, as you know. So I can only give you like a week. But let me do, the mutant animal creation rules. And I'm like, okay, great. Now, while we were waiting for this other guy's manuscript, I had been talking to Eric. I had introduced Turtles to Eric because he was sort of a fringe comic book guy. Yeah. He bought stuff here and there, like he was a big Sandman fan and loved the Fantastic Four and some other stuff. But he wasn't a big comic book guy like I was, but he would buy comics from time to time. And buy some regularly. And I had turned him on to Turtles. And he, of course, saw the same potential that I did immediately. So for these past 3 or 4 months while we were waiting for this comic strip, Eric and I had talked about the animal creation system. And he came up with the whole Bio-E thing and growth chart and all that stuff. And we had talked about what else needed to be in the book, how it needed to have, 50, 100 different animal stats. It needed to have animal powers. It needed to have, maybe animal psionic powers on top of that, and all these different elements, to the point where Eric was one of these guys, when he got hooked on an idea, he couldn't let it go. And so he had actually hammered out a huge portion of the whole animal creation thing just for fun. And I said, Eric, this is great, but we can't use this. I got this other guy working on this thing. And I said, but I love it. So you can continue to kick ideas around. I said, but we'll save it for some future Palladium RPG. And he was good with that. So as fate would have it, when a manuscript came in that I said, oh gosh, I can't use this. What am I going to do? Eric was already halfway there, right?
Yeah.
And he had like a 3-week vacation, and which is why he could only give me a week. And it was funny because, and I think, so he banged out that frickin' like 80% of this rule book in like 3.5 weeks, and polished it up in another week and a half. And I went in and tweaked it and polished it up and added a few things, but and the whole time it's super intense. It was actually really kind of fun and cool because it was very exciting, because I'd get like 3-4 calls a day from Eric because he's on vacation, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, Kev, how does this sound? And he would pitch some idea, or he'd read me a chunk of text. I'm like, that sounds great, Eric. Hey, are you available tomorrow? Let's play test it. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I work for myself. I work, out of my house. Yeah, let's play test it. Or we'd get together on a weekend or some evening, and we'd play test various pieces of it. Plus, he would play test it with some of his regular players. And then, the gaming center was already around, so he'd grab a bunch of people, sometimes people he knew, and sometimes people who just happened to be at the gaming center. And he'd just walk up to them and go, hey, I'm designing this new game. You want to play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? And half of them didn't even know what the hell that was.
Right.
And they're like, sure, we'll play. But it was just like super intense. In fact, in my memory, it almost feels like it was around the clock.
Yeah.
Kind of thing, because both of us were night owls, and both of us often didn't sleep a lot. So it was just this super intense, very creative, very fun sort of adventure into game design and RPG creation. And it was epic. And it's funny because I often talk about the Ninja Turtle comic as Eastman and Laird catching lightning in a bottle. Yeah. And we were able to do that too. So that was very, very fortunate.
Did you ever get a chance to run the game for Eastman and Laird?
No, I never did. In fact, as often as we spoke on the phone, I never met Peter Laird in person. And I met Kevin Eastman years later at a convention here in Detroit. Actually, I take that back. I think I met him at a convention earlier in Ohio or someplace. But then again, here in Detroit back in like 2002 or something. And but I'd met him at San Diego Comic-Con. We kind of hung out in 2000. And him and Julie Strand, and again, just one of the nicest people on the flippin' planet, Kevin Eastman, and all those guys. But I think again, one of the things that really worked for us is Eric and I were almost always on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
So he understood very much what I wanted. Plus, we had been talking about it for like 3 months, 4 months. Everything that we would do with it or wanted to see done with it. And then part of that philosophy is, unlike a lot of companies, and you see this with film adaptations all the time, we didn't look at the comic books and go, oh, we're going to make this ours and change everything where you couldn't recognize the characters. We take the exact opposite approach, which is how do we bring these wonderful comic book characters in this comic book medium to life in a new medium?
Yeah.
And, that's, I think, critical to the success of especially any license, is to capture the magic so that the people who already know and love the characters pick up your product and go, oh my God, it's fabulous. It's just the way the comic book is. And then new people pick it up and go, I don't know what this is, but man, I love this. And then they in turn discover the comic. In fact, I am shocked how many people discovered our games and source books before the comic book. That's Freddie Williams. That's Ciro Nieli, who did the 2012 animated, 3D animated CGI Turtle series that ran for like 6 years or 7 years. That was the case with Sophie Campbell. There's just a ton of people who discovered our game before the Turtles. And that's in part because, I mean, come on, issue 5 or 6 of the black and white comic book was out when our game came out that fall.
Yeah. I mean, it was almost, in line. Like, talk about striking while the iron's hot. So, I mean, obviously we're in the post Redux Kickstarter heyday, which did amazing for you guys. How did the original one sell?
Oh, we weren't, I thought it would do good. I thought it would do very well. I printed 10,000 copies as an initial press run for the book, which is double what we had ever printed before.
Okay.
As a first-time book, first-time release. And that made us nervous because, that was a fair amount of money, and we had, we were paying Eastman and Laird for, all that art. So there was a big art cost.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big printing thing, and it's like, are you sure? Maybe we should start slower. And I'm like, no, I feel really good about this. I'm going to go with this. So we printed 10,000 copies, and that sold out in 3 months. And I'm like, woohoo. So then we printed, I don't remember, I printed another 10,000 or if I jumped to 20,000. Yeah. But those sold out in like 3 months. And I'm like, oh man, we got something. So then I did for sure print another 20,000. And it just, and then Eric had, banged out the next Sourcebook and was already working on this because he was just really fired up for Ninja Turtles. So when this came out, I want to say it was only like 6-8 months after the original game, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures.
Yeah.
We printed 20,000 to start.
Okay.
We sold 14,000 copies day one. I had to bring in like 6 other people to help us ship everything from our tiny little warehouse.
So, I mean, all of your other games had been doing well. They had been success stories, but TMNT was just a whole nother, scale of success for Palladium.
It's what I call our first mega hit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was selling like crazy. And then the source books did very well.
Guide to the Universe, Adventures.
Yeah. Guide to the Universe, Transdimensional TMNT.
Transdimensional TMNT is one of the first ones I got.
It's epic. And then we did Truckin' Turtles and Turtles Go Hollywood. And meanwhile, the comic strip is I keep calling it comic strip. The comic book is doing gangbusters. So very quickly by Trans D, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, who had done, he had also done brand new short 10-page comic strips in these.
Yeah.
And had done the covers, both of them wrap around.
Yeah.
By the time we got to Truckin' Turtle or by Transdimensional TMNT, they don't have time.
Yeah.
So this was our first use of Jim Lawson, fabulous artist.
Yeah.
I love his mutant animals and his dinosaurs and that was the thing. I mean, there's actually mutant dinosaurs in this and mutant humans and mutant prehistoric mammals, and who doesn't love mutant dinosaurs? Who doesn't want to play or fight or encounter?
Right. Now, is this Eric's idea to do time travel?
Yeah, I'm not a big time travel guy. I personally don't care for time travel. It's so easy to abuse and so easy to do wrong or do badly. So when Eric came up to me and said, yeah, Kev, I had this great idea for time travel. And plus the latest comic issue had Renee and whatnot, the Time Lords and things. And I'm like, all right, but I got to warn you, if I don't like it, it's not going in the book, Eric. I gave him my I hate time travel pitch. And he turns it a masterpiece. I mean, in fact, his time travel rules, as far as I'm concerned, they're the best ever written. It's simple and beautiful. It's like perfection.
Nice.
So, and this is coming from a Doctor Who fan, so.
Which has the most wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey sort of time travel logic.
Yeah. Well, and we were so tight with Kevin Pete that we actually got advanced photos that we put into the Magic of Palladium Books when the movie was getting ready to be released.
Oh, that's awesome.
That was pretty cool. They sent us this stuff. And Turtles Go Hollywood was just in production, or just about to come out. And then it was funny, we recently scanned this for our own archives, so we have a copy. And someone, actually Wayne Smith, pointed out that Palladium secret project revealed. Rifts will tear 1990 in two.
Oh, man.
So it announces, that Rifts is coming, because this came out in February of 1990. And Rifts came out that summer, was a Gen Con debut. So, that's pretty wild. But, it was just a wild ride. And we were just having the times of our lives, being just total creative freedom. Yeah. And just going wild with ideas and concepts. Robotech helped us do that too. So all of a sudden, we had the financial freedom to do a lot of things that we couldn't just like a year or so before.
Well, yeah, I mean, Turtles launches, and then you're able to use that as a springboard for, we very quickly, we get Robotech, we get Ninjas and Super Spies, we get Beyond the Supernatural, and then we get Rifts, which is, another, mega hit for Palladium Books.
Yeah. So Palladium's growth starting with Palladium Fantasy, starting from the beginning, really. I mean, it's just kind of this slow, and then you hit kind of, Valley to Pharaohs, and it's like, oh, get a little wobbly. And then Palladium Fantasy, Heroes Unlimited, Turtles, and Robotech, no pun intended, takes us into the stratosphere. And it was just this beautiful trajectory of growth. Very, very exciting times. And then, like I said, we're meeting all these people and having fun. In addition to the Turtle books themselves, we spun off, and this was all Eric's idea. We spun off a independent, unrelated Palladium-owned IP, which was, After the Bomb. The concept being that there's nuclear holocaust and humans are barely clinging on. You've got the Empire of Humanity and little pockets of people, but the new life form that's really starting to surge are mutant animals. And Eric would later change it in his revised edition that it was more of a gene bomb rather than a nuclear holocaust.
Wow.
And expanded on all kinds of great stuff. There's chimera, so you have multiple animal mutations in one being, and all kinds of great stuff in there. But and that's the thing too. People are probably noticing, hey, these covers kind of look very Eastman and Laird-y. They were, and Eastman and Laird did a bunch of the interior art in the original After the Bomb book.
Oh, it's awesome.
As well. And I should point out that we've been releasing hardcover editions of our books. And a lot of them have additional pages. So like the After the Bomb hardcover has the original After the Bomb material and some other stuff from the Rifter added to it. Same thing with Palladium Fantasy. we have a hardcover of Palladium Fantasy Second Edition rules, but then we also did a Palladium Fantasy First Edition rules that includes the Tombs of Your City and Arms of Nargash Tor. So we try to give people a little extra when we can. And After the Bomb books did huge because they were designed so that they could be used with any of our games, of course, but it very much provided additional mutant animals for TMNT and Other Strangeness. And one of my favorite was Mutants Down Under. I think it was one of Eric's masterpieces after the first 3-4 source books, because it's got giant riding animals, and again, it has all kinds of fabulous art by Jim Lawson.
Yeah. Well, and
cover
Mutants in Orbit as well.
Yes, Mutant in Orbit as well. Yeah. In fact, that's got a beautiful Keith Parkinson cover. Wish I had bought that, but I didn't. And then, this is great because it's designed to be specifically used with After the Bomb and Riffs.
Yes. I was reading through the Cyberworks book, and they keep referencing the Mutants in Orbit book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So half of it is like After the Bomb, half of it's Riffs. Archie 7 is in there. And killer satellites and space stations full of mutant animals.
And why can't the people of Rift's Earth go back up into space and deal with this stuff? Well, Mutants in Orbit kind of gives you the reason why. Yeah.
Yep. So, like I said, we were just having a blast with everything. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. Well, what was your question?
So what was the impetus for the Turtles Redux here, last year, 2023?
So what happened is we're kicking butt with the Ninja Turtle and Other Strangeness line.
Yeah.
Having a blast. Everything's going great. Turtles, meanwhile, is taking off like crazy. In fact, something I should mention, because it's very fun for me to be like the unknown part of the turtle history, is that I'm the guy who introduced Kevin Pete to Mark Friedman, who would then have the toys made with Playmate and the cartoon and the movies and all the licensing you can think of. I'm the guy. I was talking to Mark about a different license because he was a licensing agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to see some of my other products. Well, at the time, the only thing I had that was a licensed product, because he's like, I want to see your various books. He goes, but I really want to see other licensed properties. And I'm like, oh, shoot. Because all I had was Justice Machine.
It was like Turtles and Justice Machine.
And TMNT and Other Strangeness. And I'm like, all right. So I sent him the books, and every time we would talk on the phone after he got those books was like, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Do you smile when you say that? I smile every time I say it. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. What do you think of those? I'm like, well, I'm a huge fan. I love it. And talk about it. And he's like, you have any idea what their sales numbers are? And I did, because I'm friends with Kevin Pete. So I'm like, they're doing this, they're doing that. And I said, that's really great in comic books. And it's just a black and white book. It's not even full color. It's not produced by a major manufacturer like, Marvel or DC. And he's like, those are great numbers. And what are your numbers? And I tell him what we sold of the, our various source books and RPG, which, when the dust cleared, we sold like 170 plus copies of 170,000 plus copies of just the core rulebook. And, the first couple source books sold like 70, 100,000 copies. And, we're just doing, and those are, by the way, gigantic numbers in the role-playing industry. So our conversations, I call about this other license. Yeah, we'll work that out. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I just can't get them out of my head. It makes me smile. Then just the title makes me happy. And I'm like, Mark, have you picked up the comics?
Have you read the comics?
And he had skimmed through my stuff, and it's like, yeah, it's serious stuff, but do you think little kids would like this? And my kids at the time were like, 5 and 7.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, my kids love the comics, and but they were more mature kids. They could handle violence and stuff, and understood what fantasy was, and and he's like, yeah, one of our conversations goes, I know this guy who's about to launch a toy company, or has just launched a toy company. I'm good friends with the president of Playmate Toys. I think I could sell him on this, but we'd have to make a cartoon, and we'd have to make it lighter, because in those days, cartoons pretty much sold the toys.
Yeah.
You had, Transformers, and all those things. And I'm like, yeah, I think it'd make a great cartoon. I think little kids would like it. I think it's got that appeal for like all ages. And we talk about it so much where I'm starting to feel uncomfortable, because we're talking like, I think I'm going to talk to my friend, at Playmate Toys. We're supposed to meet, when I'm in town, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so Mark, you're a licensing agent. I don't own these, right? I'm not the creators of the Ninja Turtles. I said, that's Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, and I'm sure they would love to talk to you. And I think, you're so excited about it. You talk about it all the time, and it's clearly you've got this whole marketing plan that's spinning in your head. You should talk to Kevin Pete. They're nice guys. And he's like, that's great, Kevin. Again, this is all before the computer or the internet, or common, everyone having a computer anyways. And this is 80s, later 80s, 87, 86, 87. Yeah, it had to be like 87, 88. And he's like, well, would you please tell them about me and give them my number? So I call up Mirage Studios, and I talk to Peter Laird. And I might be wrong in that, but I'm pretty sure it was Peter Laird that I spoke to. And he's like, I don't know, Kev. It sounds too good to be true. I think we'll pass. And I'm like, well, that's fine, Pete. That's your prerogative. Mm-hmm. But I said, look, you guys are the ones in the driver's seat. You don't have to sell or license or do anything with the Ninja Turtles and this guy. But I think you should hear what he has to say, because maybe he'll say good things, and you'll like.
Maybe there'll be something there.
And I said, I can tell you he's the real deal, and he's a good guy. All my dealings with him have been, great. So just give him a call. And they did, and they met, and the rest is history.
Like, I can understand this feels too good to be true response. But yeah, then, Turtles was blowing up. And then once the cartoon came out and the toy line, it again, we're talking another scale difference.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, you wouldn't talk about, we were peanuts compared to what Kevin Pete and what Mark Friedman was able to do with licensing. There was everything: pajamas and underoos and posters and coloring books and toys. And so the sad thing is, while that was great for Eastman and Laird and for Mark Friedman and for everyone involved in this, and great for the world because everyone loves the Turtles. And one of the neat things about Ninja Turtles is that those characters touch people in a way that other licensed characters and comic book characters don't. I don't know if it's the family nature of it, and that they're brothers and love each other, and there's always that kind of family dynamic. But anyways, and just the fact that they're turtles trying to find their way in a world of humans, and I think it really resonates with kids and especially teenagers and young adults who are struggling to find their own identity, and who are they and how do they fit in this world that they don't feel like they fit in. I don't know about you, JM, but I mean, certainly when I was growing up, I felt like an outsider, like an
outcast. No, 100%. I mean, that was the joy of role-playing games for me, is that it connected me with other outsiders and gave me a sense of community and belonging.
Exactly. It really did, and really does.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things I love about role-playing games. But the success of Turtles hurt our game line, because it went so fast from this dark and gritty comic book to toys and little kid stuff. And let's not forget the toys and apparel and the cartoons and the movies. They were all aimed at a 4 to 10-year-old audience.
Right, which is not what the original comic books or the role-playing game was really focused on.
Right, we're very much aimed at teenagers through adults of all ages. And so what happened is, because at that time the Turtles had gone so fast into little kiddom, what I call had gotten kiddified.
Yeah.
And now by 1989, 90, 91, people were being introduced to the little kid version of the Turtles before the black and white comic or our role-playing game. And I think the comic book still did fine, because comic book people don't really care, and the comic was still dark and gritty, and they could, read it at home and stuff. But role-playing games are played at homes and schools, and then, the gamers talk about it. And, the Turtles for us had basically become Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck.
Right. They lost a lot of the appeal.
Well, tragically, I think people still loved them and would play them if they weren't going to be teased for basically playing. Wait, you played Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck last night?
Yeah.
Because that's what these had become. So, because there was just no self-respecting teenager or preteen or young adult who wanted to be associated with something that fell in the same category as Mickey Mouse.
Yeah. I mean,
little kid stuff.
Thankfully, you had split off and had that you had the after the bomb line.
But that started to tank too, because they were so closely affiliated with Turtles. So to give you an idea, our sales the year before the movie came out Turtles, most licensing in most new releases have like a 3-4 year release period where it's at its peak sales, and then it starts to slowly decline, sometimes rapidly decline. And our sales had started to decline a little bit by the time the movie hype hit. And so we saw our sales go from like 1,500 copies a month for I'm just using this as a frame of reference, for just a role-playing game. It shot up to 4,500 copies a month. And so we're like, yeah! And then the movie came out, and the cartoons came out, and a new everything for kids splurge of licensed properties came out. Again, we're talking pajamas and the toys and the coloring books and all that stuff. And we saw our sales drop from 4,400 copies or 4,500 copies to 35. And then the next month, it was like 35. And the next month, it was 25. And the next month, it was 15. I mean, that fast. And it just kept going down and down and down till by the end of the following year, we're selling like 200 copies of the game. And in those days, and by our standards, those were lousy numbers.
Yeah.
And then the source books started to tank as well. And after the bomb sales, also started to slide. Not quite as steeply, but it was. And it just flatlined for us. And now that the turtles were big, Mark Friedman and Mirage needed us to have a shorter licensing. In fact, I accidentally wrote the contract in such a way that I owned the role-playing rights in perpetuity. And I think Mark Friedman thought, oh my God, I knew it. This guy isn't a good guy. He's got these rights. And I forget if it was Kev or Pete who called me up and said, so Kev, and you could tell they're kind of nervous, and they're like, when you wrote that contract back in, 85, you didn't intend to be able to do the turtle role-playing game forever, did you? And I'm like, what? No, of course not. And they're like, oh, good. That's what we told Mark. You wouldn't mind doing a new agreement where it's limited to like 5-year intervals. And I'm like, no, of course not.
Yeah. Right, that was never my intent. Yeah.
I wasn't trying to steal the turtles in any way, shape, or form. So, and so then it got to a point where to renew the license and to the money it would cost to come out with a new version in the 1990s. In fact, that's why the Rifter number 9 or 10 has a dynamic Ninja Turtle cover by Simon Beasley on it, because Kevin Eastman helped arrange to get Beasley to do what was supposed to be the cover to the new role-playing game.
Right. We
were going to reboot it then. So, gosh, we got to be talking more like 1999, 2000, and or even 2001. And I just sat back and went, man, I don't know if I can justify it. Yeah. It's going to cost us, $6,000-8,000, maybe more in art, $10,000 or more to print it, plus the licensing fee, and these sales are just so lousy. I don't know if we can recoup that in the next 5 years once we launch. And so I just let the license go. And I wish I didn't. In retrospect, I wish I had hung on to it, but we let it go. So, and almost immediately, it was like, oh gosh, I wish I had kept that license, because we'd get ideas for things we could do with the turtles and what we'd like to do with the turtles. And so when I brought Sean Owen Robertson on to be my 50-50 business partner, and to eventually take over Palladium Books when I'm too old and frail in like 40 years.
But not for a very, very long time.
He, he'll take over the company. And even before I brought him on, he's like, Kev, what about getting the Ninja Turtles? And I had thought about it. I wanted to do it. In fact, Nickelodeon had reached out to me in, I think it was 2015 or 16.
Okay.
Somewhere's in there, 17, to get the Turtles back and re-release it. And just, we were in the throes of some other stuff, and I didn't think we could do it justice, so I passed on it. And then a few years later, I had a big name guy. I don't know if he would like me to mention his name specifically, but big fan, Hollywood guy, come to me and say, hey, let's bring back the Ninja Turtles. And I thought about it, and we talked about it, and that didn't pan out either. So when Sean came on board, like a year later, he's like, what about Ninja Turtles? Ninja Turtles was the game that introduced Sean to Palladium Books.
Awesome.
So he was familiar with the comic book. His uncle, I believe, had bought him one or two of the graphic novels, and he fell in love with the Turtles. And then he found our game. One of his buddies apparently had, I think in high school, had accidentally bought the role-playing game thinking it was something comic book related. And he's like, hey, Sean, you're into these role-playing game things. You want this book? And Sean's like, there's a role-playing game for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Yeah, I want this. So he actually traded some of his coveted BattleTech stuff and his lunch, I think, to get a copy of Ninja Turtles, fell in love with it, and then
I'm familiar with that story.
So when Sean said, let's bring back the Turtles, and one of the great things about Sean, and one reason he's my partner and has become a dear friend, is much like Eric Woodjick, he almost always gets it. He sees things the same way I see things.
Yeah.
And sees the potential. And right away when I said, we should do like this re-release, I was calling it a re-release, and he dubbed it the Redux, and I'm like, oh, that's good. The Redux edition, that's great. And then it was funny because I was like, in my mind, what I've always wanted to do is when we bring this back, I want to clean it up, which of course Sean wanted to do, make it a little bit more clean, because let's face it, I mean, this is a nearly 40-year-old book.
Yeah, no.
The terms and stuff we use isn't the same parlance as the modern audience, and we just need to clean some stuff up, straighten it up, re-edit it, relay it out, make sure it's clean and beautiful. And I said, but I want to colorize it. I want it, and not just here's comic book colors. I want it to be beautiful, magnificent, state-of-the-art, blow people's minds color.
Yeah.
And we had a guy lined up for that, and Sean was like all on board for that too. And that's what we're doing.
I can't wait to see it in hand when it finally ships out.
Me too. I can't wait for people to have it, to get it, and all the cool Kickstarter exclusives that Paramount let us do.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Kevin, thank you so much. When we come back, our next interview is going to be about Robotech and another mega hit for Palladium. So thanks for doing this. And to you guys who are watching, thanks for watching.
Cowabunga.